Okay, shall we start? Good afternoon. So welcome to M1651A. This room is humongous, but our class size seems a lot smaller, so you can come closer to me if you have a hard time listening in the back. But in any case, we'll start out by kind of just describing a bit about the course stuff, the logistics and stuff like that, and take any questions that you may have. And then we'll start on some of the introductory material. For most of you, this is probably the first exposure into this topic. So feel free as we go along to ask questions and all, because this is, at times the material is somewhat dense and boring, but it's the nature of that material. So let me start out by introducing myself and the course staff. So as you know, this class is a cross-listed course. It's required by required of both EE students and CS students. Everyone in the two departments has to take it. I am a faculty in both the departments. I work in kind of essentially at the boundary of hardware and software. This course is, as you will see, on hardware that underlies computing system, but a lot of things, a lot of hardware design nowadays is very much like software design, so a lot of concepts carry over. So if you have done programming and all, you'll see sort of a lot of parallels that exist. I've given my contact information up there, but probably the best way to catch my attention would be to go through Piazza, for which you should have received an invitation, and hopefully you have used it in some other courses, but if not, it's an online system which is very popular at many universities, including many courses here at UCLA. I've enjoyed using it, and it basically helps both sides, I think. Students like it, and it makes our life a lot easier also in terms of answering your questions. So that's the preferred way. Of course, if there are things of some very personal nature that you want to talk to me related to your grade or something, then feel free to write to me or come set up a time to meet me. I sit in Bolter Hall, and so office hours and all are going to be, my office hours are going to be there. We have two TAs in the class. So one TA is Salma Al-Malaki. Salma sitting here? Nope. Okay. And then second one is Shelley, who's both of them are graduate students in electrical engineering, and sort of they do research in these topics and also extremely well qualified to help you out. Salma TA'd this class last year also, so she has experience with lots of issues and all sort of that come up or would be able to anticipate questions. As you know, this class has 4 discussion sections. I would encourage you to really stick to your discussion sections so that there's continuity, because we cannot guarantee that, excuse me, that the 4 sections are going to remain synchronized, although we'll cover the same material. I've listed the office hours, so we have tried to make sure that there are office hours every day except Friday, when you have discussion sections, so you have access to TAs anyway. So I've listed them out here, but they're also posted on Piazza. We'll probably fine-tune them as we go along and figure out that some office hours are not in demand and we can move them around. Right now, we are just guessing based upon trying to create some non-overlapping office hours. Okay, so so much for kind of the course stuff. The course itself, this course is titled Logic Design of Digital Systems, and there are kind of there's the word logic there, the word systems there, and the word digital there. Systems. So let's talk about it. So digital systems. So it's basically about systems which process information in a digital form. By digital form, I mean as opposed to something which is continuous variable. We are dealing with information which is expressed in a discrete manner, essentially using bits. Can take discrete sets of values, but we'll see that this thing is, we'll see it today actually, that this is sufficient to represent information in all its forms, and modern society really does depend by and large on digital systems, information being processed digitally. System is a general engineering term referring to anything which takes something as input, produces something as output. In this particular case, we are interested in information systems which take information in, produce information out, and specifically information which is represented in a digital form. So computers are obviously the first thing which comes to mind when we talk about digital systems, but you're not limited to that. Lots of other things take information in a digital form, produce digital form, even though we don't think of them as computers, because they may be computers hidden inside things of different types, okay, or so they are doing processing, they are processing digital information, but we don't use them to run Microsoft Word or stuff like that. They may not be running Windows or things. So they are just systems which are processing information. The other term which is in the title of the course is logic design, and what this is kind of really making a reference to is the fact that we want to approach the design of these systems in a mathematically rigorous, in a logical fashion. You can always create things to some extent by hacking things up, kind of the maker culture, but unfortunately, while it's a lot of fun, it doesn't work for creating things which are robust, things which are complex. So when you are doing design of large-scale things, complicated things, you need to design them in a systematic way. So one way of titling this course would have been systematic design of digital processing systems, okay, but course is older than my arrival at UCLA, so that's the term which is logic design of digital systems. So we are going to spend quite a bit of time understanding how to design these systems in a systematic way so that they are robust, so that they meet certain goals cost, certain goals of performance, things like that. So that's kind of roughly what the objective is. The other thing is that we want to design, these systems can be very complicated, and one of the ways we know how to deal with complexity is by breaking things down into simpler parts and then putting them back together. So a lot of what you would see is to really, how can we make complicated digital systems from simpler parts whose characteristics we understand, and then we put them together, and then can we say something about what this more complicated thing is going to do. So these simpler parts are called gates, or more specifically logic gates, because they do some logic operation. We'll see that by logic operations, like many of you have done programming. So what are logic operations? Anyone? You've programmed in some language?
Yeah.
Which one?
C++.
C++, great. Okay, so what are logic operations?
True and false.
Huh? True and false are logic values. Great. What operations lead to true and false values?
It's like and
or exactly XOR, all those kind of things. Those are the logic operations. So you'll see that we'll basically have hardware analogs for those things, as something which does AND, something which does OR, something which does XOR, things like that. So we are going to start with those very simple stuff and going to build things up. And if you have done any course on set theory or logic or philosophy, you'll probably may have encountered that they also start with these very primitives and develop entire logical systems based upon that, so that you can reason about more complicated propositions and all. It's exactly the same thing. The roots of the digital systems is indeed in those in logic and philosophy, and going back into 1930s. Okay, so we want to do digital systems. We want to design them systematically. We want to design them from simpler things. Okay, so that we have some control over the complexity. Then in the process, I'm hoping that I managed to give you both kind of a theoretical perspective, because it's necessary to design things which are correct. I don't want you to graduate from UCLA and design something which will crash. hopefully you design things which are robust and efficient and so on and so forth. But the other side also is practical. This is an area which is a lot of fun. I mean, information technology is all around us, and while software is tremendously important, but software without hardware goes nowhere. So a lot of progress is happening because it's driven by, fueled by progress in hardware, and the boundary between the two is often very sort of nebulous. Okay, really, what you are seeking to do is some function, and that function, if it is very power critical or very performance critical, you might do it in hardware. If it is something where you can slack off, or something which is tremendously complicated, you may end up doing it in software running on top of hardware. So hardware is sort of is a critical part of the equation. So hopefully, and I'll give you a practical perspective of it. One of the other things I want to leave you with is how to do good digital design. In software, the culture is one of hack, retry, retread. And the reason it works very well is because the cost of iteration is very little. If you make a mistake, you go edit a file, recompile, voila, you are done. In case of hardware, the cost of making mistake is humongous. If Intel makes a tiny mistake in its microprocessors, it's a multi-billion-dollar mistake. You don't have that second chance. Your company may die because of so the same mistakes which you can get away in software, often, not always, are much harder in hardware just because of the sheer cost. Just to give you a sense, modern hardware, computer hardware, is built on integrated circuits, which are made in these factories which are called as foundries, semiconductor foundries. And each one of them takes many tens of billions of dollars to establish, consumes electricity of the order of a small city. They're just sort of represent the extreme case of manufacturing. And very few countries can manage to do them. Okay, I mean, basically, East Asia and the US are pretty much it, and even US has gotten out of that game because it's just so expensive. So now imagine you do a run on these things with your chip, and it comes back buggy. You don't have a way of, I mean, you just have to redo the whole thing. So very costly. So mistakes have very different consequences. So important to do good digital design. Now, there are a lot of things we will not cover in this class. This is, after all, a first course, just a quarter-long course. In many universities, this is a semester-long course. So already we have it's a shrunk version. So we will not go into things like how these gates themselves are made, using kind of the transistors and the processing on the silicon and stuff like that. There are other courses. If you are in EE, if you're in CS, then you won't get to do it ever. We'll also not look into all this manufacturing stuff. A lot of it is chemistry and stuff like that. So we are not going to do that. And then we are also not going to worry about what goes on top of these systems, the software. Hopefully you are doing things like CS 31, 32. Some of you may have done AP computer science, and also you've already seen a lot of that. So we're kind of sitting somewhere in this middle, trying to give you a sense of that all that software you have been writing, what does it run on? And then if you're an EE headed towards making physical things and all, at least give you a sense of what are you making, where does it lead to, what's the complex stuff sitting on top. So after you're done with this course, there are lots of follow-on classes. Some of them are already required for those of you who are in computing-oriented tracks, but some are not. But there's a rich set of courses which kind of exist. There's a book that we have specified for this class. It's a book by, at least the lead author is professor at Stanford, and the guy who leads NVIDIA, the graphics company, their research division. It's one of the newer books, came out 3-4 years ago. They're still on the first edition, which unfortunately means that there are bugs in the book, as in typos and mistakes and stuff like that. But it's a book which I've found to give a much better practical feel of the thing and much more modern in its outlook. Whether you should buy the book or not, I kind of leave it to your discretion. We'll follow the structure of the book, but I also hand out slides, and so a lot of that material is there. When we hand out problems, we will fully specify the problem. So we'll not simply say do problem 9.2 from the book. So you don't need the book in that sense. On the other hand, the book has a lot of other material, other problems, which obviously we cannot provide. So I kind of leave it to you to kind of figure out your right sense. I realize textbooks are insanely expensive, so I would hate to force you to buy an expensive textbook, but so figure, I leave it up to you. So is it critical that without it you will not be able to do work? No, it's not. Is it going to put you at somewhat of a disadvantage? Depends on you. Might in many cases. So I kind of leave it up to you. Any questions so far? Okay, so sort of these are the book is used for is meant for almost a year-long sequence. Obviously, we're not going to be covering anywhere close to that book. So I've listed kind of the chapters that we are going to do. A couple of them are in italics because I'll most likely drop them. That's my current thought, but I did cover them traditionally. But I'm thinking of introducing some different topics, so we'll see how it goes. In terms of online, the official UCLA website for the course obviously is the CCLE one, but I'm going to be experimenting with a couple of things which might make this website almost redundant. In addition, as I already mentioned, we use Piazza quite a bit. Hopefully you have seen Piazza in some other course, but if not, it's super easy to use. You should have, if you are enrolled in the class, you should have received an invitation to sign up for this course on Piazza. If not, kind of you can just go there and do it. You don't need to remember any URLs because I kind of realized we have a bit of a chicken and egg problem. The URL is up there, but you don't have access to any hard copies. So if you just go to piazza.com, type EEM16 or CSM51A, it should take you to the link for this thing and you can sign up, but you should have received an email. Actually, people get email? Someone? Yeah, okay, good. That's where you should ask questions. That's where we'll be posting materials. That's where we are posting lectures. And also, actually, I also make recordings of the lectures. You might have noticed that 3, 2, 1 countdown, which was happening at the beginning. So I record everything that appears on the screen as well as my audio. Unfortunately, though, as I walk away from the laptop, it may not pick things up, but we try to. So anyway, those are resources. I don't make any promise about the video part because there may be times at which things may not work out my way, but at least we try to. And also, it usually takes me 2, maybe 3 days to get it out. Usually sooner, but don't expect that, oh, I missed the class and it would be promptly out there. This is something I do on my own with no university support, so it's kind of on an entirely best effort basis. So Piazza is a primary place for discussion, Q&A. You can post directed messages just at the course staff. You can post things anonymously. I reserve the right to disable that if I see it being misused, but thus far hasn't happened, so hopefully it will work out. So some of you may be uncomfortable asking a question, although no question is ever stupid, so you should never be afraid, but just in case you are feeling uncomfortable, you can use the anonymous feature. One thing I do use Piazza for, and you'll see later, there is course participation points also. And one of the things we make use of it is how much you participate on Piazza. So while Piazza doesn't tell me you posted this posting, but what it does tell me is how many posts you made, how many questions you asked, how many questions you answered, those kind of statistics which I do incorporate to see your level of engagement in the class. So that level of privacy, unfortunately, you are giving up.
So even if we post anonymously, you can see how much we posted?
Yeah, so I can see how many posts you posted, even though you posted anonymously. Yeah. And how many questions you answered and all that stuff. Yeah. And I guess other than if I were to keep polling every few minutes and see an anonymous post and then compare it against the stat, I don't have any way of knowing who you are. And I have better things. So in any case, feel comfortable to use the system. That's, I guess, what I'm trying to say. Okay, it's I think it's a pretty well. It works out pretty well. Signing up is your responsibility. I'm not going to babysit you. So I've sent out the initial invite. I've described to you how to enroll on Piazza at this stage. You have to figure out. Okay. The other thing which I'm sure is on everyone's mind is grading. And what are the elements of the class? So we'll have firstly two types of homeworks. One which I call as problem sets. These are primarily designed to see your understanding of conceptual problem and give conceptual answers. Okay? We'll have 4 of them, unequally weighted, adding up to a total of 16% of the class, 16% of your grade. Then we'll have what I term as design assignments, and these are going to be done using EDA tools, which stands for electronic design automation. So these are essentially the equivalent of compilers that you use for software. Okay, so these are things which take as input a description of the hardware and then create the hardware or create something which is closer to the hardware. So electronic design automation is a multi-billion-dollar industry. These are the tools which are used. We are, of course, not going to be using professional type tools. We will use something very, very simple, but kind of the intent is the same, that I want you to go through a design element as well. So we will have the way this will work is, so there are 3 mandatory design assignments of different complexity and therefore different weight, and they will add up to, what did I write, 21%, okay? And then we'll have one at the end, an optional assignment. Think of it as kind of a sort of a little project, if you may. But it is optional in the following sense. If you decide not to do it, then your grade from the final would be applied to this, okay? Or another way of saying it, the weight for your final goes up in that case, okay? So that is 15% of your grade. So if you do it, then this is it. If you don't do it, then your final essentially has a 15% more weight. It's your choice, but it's going to be an irrevocable choice. You'll have to make it prior to submission. If you submit this homework, the deed is done. If you don't submit this design assignment, then also okay. So you can look at the thing and decide how busy you are. I do realize that at the end of the quarter, things get tight. On the other hand, for many students, the design part is more fun and they're stressed out during a final exam and all. So this lets you do things in a manner which is more controlled. So it's a decision you can make when the time comes. Any question on any of these 2 grading elements? Okay, if not, the third and the fourth one are, of course, the exams. So we'll have 2 exams, midterm on May 10th, a Tuesday, and the final exam on June 6th, which is the designated slot. I think it's 6:30 to 9:30 p.m., so it's in the evening. I imagine it would be in this room, because that's usually how the exams work out here. The weights are in proportion to the time, 18%, 27%. You are going to be allowed to bring in cheat sheets, but nothing else. So the reason is that the act of preparing cheat sheet is usually forces you to learn. Okay, so I wanted to kind of not use textbooks and all extra slides. And certainly no online devices. Okay, and then finally, some percentage set aside for participation, and hopefully all of this adds up to 34. Yeah, it adds up to 100%. So this is where Piazza participation, discussion section. So basically, the TAs tell me over time you learn your names. So by the time the quarter ends, those of you who are more vocal, I will have your names. Those of you who never contact me, I'll probably not get your name, but then of course your grade contact will not look good. Coming to office hours, things like that. Okay. Now that's the distribution, but there's a second critical element, which is how the grading will actually work out in terms of grades and all. So I want to be, I don't want you to be grading focused, and I also don't, at the same time, I also don't want to constrain myself from experimenting things which may not work out. Okay, so like a problem which is of a different flavor and doesn't work out and all. So I don't want to be stressed out, and I don't want me to be stressed out or my hands to be constrained. So the way I'm going to do this thing is the following, and just sort of hopefully I can convey what's happening. So every time I give you a homework or an exam and all, what we'll do is we'll take your scores there. That score will have a base component, which is the required part, and then there will be some extra credit stuff which I often throw your way. What we'll do is we'll take your base scores and we are going to normalize them. We are going to normalize them so that the highest score in the class maps to 100 and the median score in the class maps to 80. And the mapping would be done using a linear function, so very trivial mapping. Okay? And then you will add your extra credit score in a scaled fashion. So like for example, if the exam was out of 50, then you will scale it to factor of 2 to get 100. Okay, so that would be your score on that entity, homework, exam, design assignment, whatever. And then the way the course grade is going to work is, if you score 90 or more, it would be some sort of an A. If it's between 80 through but not 90, it's going to be some sort of B, and 70 and 60 and below 60 is an F. Okay, so that's the way this thing will work. But with an additional caveat, since it's very hard for us to make sure that the extent to which cheating happens or doesn't happen on the take-home activities, so there's a further requirement that you have to pass the exams. And passing requirements are pretty relaxed, but nevertheless, your total of midterm and final should add up to a passing score, and the passing score I have defined on that scale, normalized scale formula at 66. So what I mean by that is that if your score on midterm plus final normalized to 100 is less than 66, then irrespective of how stellar you were on the homeworks, you will be given an F. Okay, so that's the way it's going to work. Any questions? And again, the thing to keep in mind is extra credit is extra credit. Okay, so it's not part of this median normalization. So it's possible that if everyone does extra credit and takes extra credit, then the actual grade is possible. Questions? Okay. But having said that, so I mean, in some senses, grading at this stage is outside my control. It will just depend upon how you do what the curve ends up being. Okay, but part of my intent is I wanted to not worry about the absolute scores. I'm known to, and oftentimes I kind of throw out problems which turn out to be extra hard, and the class blows it, but that doesn't mean anything. Okay, I mean it all gets kind of rescaled back up. Okay, so that's the way we are going to work. Oh, one other thing I forgot to mention, and which I'm surprised no one asked. If it turns out that the median is already above 80, then I'm not going to lower it. It will stay what it is, okay? Because that would be pretty brutal. So this rescaling is only in the upward direction. So if the class median was 75, it will move up to 80. But if it was, let's say, already 85, I'll leave it as it is, okay? Again, sort of, that may mean, conceivably, depending upon the thing, the actual grade profile may be much better than this. Okay? Let's see, what else? Some of the things will be graded by the TAs or the grader that the department assigns. And in general, their word would be final, okay, in the sense that particularly stuff graded by the TAs, you go and talk to them, okay. So the person who graded, because we want to, again, maintain equity across the students. Because the same person tries to be consistent on a question, whereas if you shop around among the different course staff, you may get different grades. So we want a question graded by me, let's say, if you have any objections, I will be the one revising your score, and likewise for some lines and so forth. Okay, so kind of we stick with that. Okay, let's see. Format of exams. Not much needs to be said there, other than to say the following: that the final exam is going to emphasize the post-midterm material, but is all-inclusive. Okay, part of it is because the nature of the course is such that if I were to say we'll only examine you on material after the midterm, then I cannot really examine you on anything. Okay, because the pre-midterm part is critical. So it's going to be all-inclusive. The other thing is no blue books. We'll hand out to you. This holds true for homework also. We hand out sheets in which there is space for answering, and you have to answer there. Okay, no sheets of your own. They will not be graded. Homework logistics. A part of this thing which we have struggled with a lot, and this year I'm trying kind of a different approach to handling requests for extensions and stuff like that, is the following. We'll not give any extensions. Instead, we are giving you 7 late days of budget. Okay, you can use them as you see fit. If homework in this class is due at the same time as you have a midterm in some other class, plan it out. This is 7 days. Our homework is due on Friday. If you take the weekend, then that's 2 late days. With us, and we'll track it. You can have to use an whole entity, so you cannot say, oh, 1 hour here and 23 hours there. You are 1 hour late, it's 1 day gone out of your delay budget. Okay. With one exception, we are going to put a limit on each assignment as to how many late days you can use. And the reason is the following: we'll have an absolute deadline because we have to hand out the solutions also. And particularly for homeworks which happen just before the midterm or just before the final, that becomes important. And also, there will be no extension beyond the last day of the classes. Okay, so keep that into account. If you sort of bank your late days until much later, you may not be able to use them. Okay. So beyond this, we will not entertain any requests for extensions unless for some particular reason we decide to give a blanket extension. May happen if, I don't know, some computer problem at our end, something like that, but we don't anticipate that. Okay, so 7 late days, you keep track of it, decide whichever way you want to use that. And you have 4 problem sets and 3 design assignments plus a possible optional design assignment depending upon whether you take it. Any questions on this? Okay. Let's see. Problem sets. So we will not take hard copy submissions. You have to scan them and submit as PDFs. All phones have some scanning software, many of them free apps available. So you can scan them, it does page alignment and stuff like that. So there is at this stage no rhyme or reason or no excuse really that you cannot do this thing. But if you really have some complete inability to do it, come and talk to me, we'll figure something out. Okay, but I want you to, so there are a couple of ways that you can kind of approach this thing. One is we are going to hand out, our homeworks are in the form of Google Doc handout. So you can always just take that, make a copy of it and just answer it within that file and generate a PDF. Or you can print it out, write on it, use some app on the phone or scanners which are available at various places on the campus. Use them. I leave the choice to you. But there are at this stage plenty of no-cost ways of doing a PDF. It should be a single PDF. So if there are 10 pages in the homework, it should be a single PDF, not 10 PDFs being submitted. Then, in terms of the actual submission, most likely, and this is not certain, I'm going to be trying out a new service which many universities are using called Grade Scope. And the way it works is that you upload your homework there. You have to create an account there. You upload the homework there, and you have to demarcate where all you have answered different questions. And then our grader will grade online, and that's where you will see your see your grade on a per account basis. Many universities are using it. My daughter at her college uses that in many of her courses, or courses use it. And I think it's a very nice system, much better than the CCLE thing, which really is just upload the file and doesn't do anything else. Okay, so we're going to try this one out. If it's a disaster in making, then we'll sort of back off, but at least the experience from other places seems to be very good, so we'll do that. So again, if you have some struggle in terms of the PDF creation for your homework, come and talk to us in advance. Perhaps we can guide you, provide you with some suggestions and stuff like that. But again, if you have any reasonably modern smartphone, you already have a good scanner. Questions on this? Okay, so design assignments. So design assignments, we are largely going to be using a tool called Logisim, which I'm going to describe very shortly. And we'll provide, unfortunately, design assignments for us to grade meaningfully. We have to specify lots of constraints. It's kind of like in a software case, you might be asked to write software functions which take particular type of argument, have certain kind of function names, things like that. It's analogous out here. And you have to comply with them because we grade your assignment by running it against some test at our end. And unfortunately, for classes of this size, there's no way humanly we can go each and every line and kind of figure things out or do manual grading for each one of them. So your files are going to be run against a program, a grading program, which will run several tests, see whether your design passes or fails. So very important that you comply with it. At the end, you're going to have a bunch of files, and you are going to zip them, and that is what you're going to be submitting. For the first homework, we'll spell things out. We also have had instances where students don't save, and then computer crashes or whatever, and they lost their design. Again, I mean, it's nothing specific to this class. I think you are taking a lot of risk. If you do multi-hour session without saving the work, okay, I mean, if something happens, you really don't have any recovery. I also highly encourage using things like Dropbox or OneDrive or Google Drive or whatnot, so that there's a cloud copy of your work automatically. So things like that, just kind of prudent stuff that you would do anyway. For any course, same thing you should exercise out here as well. Our primary thing, so Logisim is one thing you'll be using, but one of the feedback I had from students previously was that Logisim is really an educational tool. So many students also wanted to see things which are more relevant in later in life in terms of industry usage and all. So we are also going to introduce this time around some use of a language called Verilog, which is what is called as a hardware description language. It is used in industry along with one other language called VHDL to describe hardware, and then you kind of compile hardware into generating other types of files which then drive the manufacturing process. So we are going to offer some simple questions and all around that, and a lecture going over Verilog. So this is a new thing I'm introducing. I think it should work out well, but we'll keep it simple. I mean, it's a very complicated thing later on. There are other courses which pick on that, but for many of you, this may be your last digital logic class, so hopefully you will be left with a little bit of how the design is done more on the industry side also. So we're going to try that out as well. Logisim, the way Logisim works is the following, that remember earlier on I had said that we will design systems from simpler gates, simpler elements. So it has a library of simpler elements, each one of them representing a little system, little gate, and then you wire them up to create something more complicated. So Logisim works by essentially giving you an interactive tool where on one side you see a bunch of, let me see if I can. Okay, so on one side you have a bar where you have a kind of a listing of elements in its library, and you can select those, and then in the main panel You kind of bring them in, so you see kind of things which are kind of more boxy, tangles, or those kind of shapes. They are the different kind of gates, and then you wire them up. So you take output of one thing and connect to input of something else. You may have done, if you have done like programming in certain languages like Scratch or things like that, you may, or First Robotics, I think they use these kind of visual programming languages. So essentially, you're kind of creating a system by wiring up simpler things, and each simpler thing represents some function, and you can take a bunch of these and think of it as a new module, and then use that in turn in another design. So this Friday, the TAs are going to go over design using Logisim also. So one thing I also wanted to announce was that please bring, you should bring your laptops to the design sections, because that's the only way we can help you with or do these kind of online things. So very important, bring your laptop. If you don't have a laptop, we'll pair you up with someone in the class, but unfortunately this class is best experience if you are using these tools. Okay, so bring that on. I'll also assign you some tasks to do prior to that in terms of setting things up. There is again a URL at which you can download this stuff. It's a Java program. Those of you who have Macs, and I see some of you do, what you will see is that it will complain this works only under older version of Java, and then it will do a pop-up box, and you have to download Java 1.6. Go ahead, do it. Apple provides it. Just download it and run it. Okay, but it works fine. If you still run into problem, let me know. As you can see, I use a Mac. I mean, this thing works fine. On Windows, I don't have any direct experience, but I've not heard any complaints, and it also works under Linux. So whichever platform you are in, it should work fine. Let's see. There is a lot of documentation that it comes with. There's a beginner's tutorial, there is a guide, user guide, there's a library reference. By library reference, what I mean is it's a documentation where for each one of those simpler blocks, they describe what the block does, what are its inputs, what are its outputs, what are its functions. It's kind of like the description of a function library in software or a class library for C++ or Java. So it's like equivalent out there. In general, our policy in the class would be, if you are asking a question which really belongs to the category you didn't read the manual, we are going to remain silent, okay? Because I want you to take the initiative and look for the information, or just it's all out there. So questions and all generally really are meant for things that don't exist or are not easily accessible. So spend some time this week to kind of set yourself up. And on Friday, when you come in your discussion section, we are going to be using Logisim to walk you through some stuff. So any questions? Okay. Since I also mentioned Verilog, so for Verilog, we are actually going to be using, there's a web service called EDA Playground, where a lot of EDA tools are available for access, and they're used by many universities. They have access to Verilog, so we're going to be using that. And since our design requirements are going to be very simple, that would suffice for our needs. Okay? So nothing needs to be installed for that. Cheating and plagiarism and stuff like that. I mean, you all know university policy, honor code, blah blah blah. Main thing is, in a course of this nature, where again we have design assignments and things like that, it's extremely important that you not misuse the freedom that you are being given. We do have means and check, just like in software program out here also, against copying and all. And trust me, these designs are complicated enough that we can tell when two things are suspiciously similar. Similar bugs, similar style, under the hood style, and stuff like that. Okay, so don't misuse our trust in you. The other thing is, under no condition are you to shop around for solutions from previous versions of this course for the design assignments that may exist. firstly, we have copies of those, so we obviously will run a similarity check against that. But that apart, kind of obviously it's not fair to your classmates, so you should not go around fishing for those things. These problems are hard to create, so I must admit that there are times at which we are forced to recycle things. Creating a design assignment is not easy, particularly when we also have to worry about its grading, backend, and stuff like that. So we expect you to kind of really do things on your own. Okay. Of course, like I said, we take measures to detect and prevent. Questions? Yeah. Let's see. So some important to-do list for this week for you. Download and install Logisim. Read the documentation. You may not understand all of it, but walk to the tutorial. Do all of this before Friday. Make sure you are signed up on Piazza because you'll be missing out on things. The only way to access these lecture slides is through Piazza, so you should go there anyway. The PDFs I post are one-page PDFs. Now, many students say, can you post 4 per page, or 6 per page? Every operating system that I know of, when you print, in the print dialog box, it lets you select how many pages you want to print per page. So I am not going to create PDFs with n pages per page. You can do it yourself. Again, these kind of things, I think, just are easily done at your end, so I don't want to clutter the download site. So we'll be posting PDFs the way they appear. Okay, let's see, what else do I have? Not in this lecture, and unfortunately I seem to have misplaced my Apple Pencil, but I would be annotating the slides as we go along, and so the PDFs would both be kind of a raw version, but as well as things where I handwrite things on the thing. Unfortunately, today's lecture, it's not going to happen. So that would minimize my use of the whiteboard, and you'll just have all the record. That also has the advantage, it makes it into the YouTube video recording that I do. Also, all the lectures from last year also are on YouTube, so if you just Google for on YouTube, search for M16, you'll find that. Other than a couple of topics, we are mostly following that structure. Also, my course content of my M16 are quite different from the one which is taught in computer science, as well as by some. I think my EE colleagues are following the content I created, but the CS side uses a different textbook, for example. So material from there doesn't kind of carry over. Okay, let's see. What else? Yeah, so I already wrote the last point. Remember to bring your laptop. Logisim, so more formally for week 1 task, this is not a formal homework and all, but really you should do it, is to download, play with Logisim. Okay, quite important to do that. Okay, before I move on to the main material, any questions? Any aspect of what I said? Okay. So let's do the following. Does everyone like a little break, halfway point? Okay. I think my throat will also appreciate it. So let's do that, 5 minutes. Okay. And I'm here, so if you have any questions, you are welcome to.